Before we start, let me ask you something. What would you do if your own children mocked you for trying to find love again? Would you listen to them or prove them spectacularly wrong? This story has over 47,000 words of pure family drama, unexpected romance, and the most satisfying grandma revenge you'll ever hear. If that sounds like your kind of content, hit subscribe right now because we drop stories like this weekly, and you're going to want notifications on. Today we're talking about Sarah, the 68-year-old widow who shocked her entire family by finding true love on Bumble while their marriages fell apart. Her kids tried to stop her. They failed spectacularly. Let's get into it. Sarah Wang stared at her phone screen, her reading glasses sliding down her nose as she squinted at the Bumble logo. The app had taken approximately 17 minutes to download. Her Wi-Fi was acting up again, and now it sat there on her home screen like a tiny yellow beacon of possibility. Or humiliation. She hadn't quite decided which. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March, and rain drummed against the windows of her Arlington condo. The kind of steady gray rain that made the whole world feel muted. Sarah had already reorganized her spice cabinet, watched 3 episodes of a British baking show, and called her sister in Sacramento, who'd spent 40 minutes complaining about her sciatica. The silence that followed had felt cavernous. 3 years. That's how long Robert had been gone. 3 years since the heart attack that took him in his sleep, peaceful and sudden, leaving Sarah with a paid-off mortgage, a comfortable pension, and an emptiness that some days felt like it might swallow her whole. Her friend Gloria from Water Aerobics had suggested the dating app over coffee last week. Sarah, honey, you're 68, not dead. Robert wouldn't want you sitting in this condo talking to your African violets. I don't talk to my plants, Sarah had protested. You name them, sweetie. That's close enough. So here she was, creating a profile like a teenager, except teenagers probably didn't need to take a 10-minute break to figure out how to upload photos. She chose a picture from Linda's wedding. She looked good in that blue dress, her hair still dark then, Robert's arm around her waist. Then she deleted it. Too sad. She picked one from her trip to Sedona last fall instead. Silver hair, hiking boots, red rocks behind her, genuine smile. Bio section. Retired Boeing analyst, love hiking, cooking, terrible puns, and NPR. My late husband always said I made the best bolognese in Virginia. Looking for someone to share recipes and adventures with. She hit submit before she could overthink it, feeling her heart race like she'd done something dangerous. She should have kept it to herself. But Sarah had never been good at secrets, and Sunday dinner at her house had always been an open forum. That was her first mistake. The pot roast was perfect. 3 hours at 325 degrees, the meat falling apart at the touch of a fork. Sarah had set the dining table with the good china, the stuff with the tiny blue flowers that had been her mother's. Linda and Tom arrived first, Linda already on her phone. Tom carrying a bottle of wine that Sarah knew cost less than $10 because she'd seen the price tag he'd forgotten to remove. Michael and Jennifer showed up 20 minutes late, as usual, with their teenage daughter Madison, who immediately disappeared upstairs to Sarah's guest room with her phone. Traffic was insane, Michael said, kissing his mother's cheek. He looked tired, Sarah thought. Dark circles under his eyes, his polo shirt wrinkled like he'd grabbed it from the laundry basket. They settled around the table, passing dishes, falling into the familiar rhythm of family dinner. Linda complained about her boss. Tom talked about a golf tournament. Jennifer mentioned something about Madison's sati prep. It was all very normal until Sarah, emboldened by half a glass of Pinot Grigio, decided to share her news. So, I did something this week, she said brightly, cutting into her pot roast. I joined a dating app. Bumble, actually. Gloria helped me set it up. The silence was immediate and absolute. Linda's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Michael's wine glass paused midair. Even Tom, who usually paid minimal attention to anything Sarah said, looked up with an expression of pure shock. You did what? Linda nearly choked, setting down her fork with a clatter. She reached for her wineglass like a drowning woman reaching for a life preserver, taking a long gulp before staring at her mother with wide eyes. I joined Bumble, Sarah repeated, keeping her voice level. It's a dating app, very popular apparently. Gloria's sister met her boyfriend on it. Mom, Michael said slowly, like he was explaining something to a child. Do you have any idea how dangerous those apps are? They're full of scammers, catfishers, con artists. Your father always said you watch too much Dateline, Sarah muttered, spearing a carrot with more force than necessary. Tom set down his fork with the authoritative thud of someone about to deliver wisdom. He leaned back in his chair, assuming what Sarah privately called his lecture position. Sarah, with all due respect, online dating is really more for younger people. People who understand technology and social media. No offense, but do you even know how to spot a fake profile? These scammers are sophisticated. They target vulnerable older women. I built financial spreadsheets for Boeing's 777 program before you were born, Tom, Sarah interrupted, her voice sharp. I think I can manage a dating app. Linda jumped in, her voice rising with the particular brand of panic that adult children reserve for their parents' perceived mistakes. Mom, seriously, this is dangerous. Remember Mrs. Patterson from church? She met someone online and he convinced her to wire him $12,000 for a business emergency. She almost lost her house. Mrs. Patterson also thinks the government is putting microchips in flu shots, Sarah pointed out. I'm not senile. No one's saying you're senile, Jennifer offered diplomatically, though her expression suggested she absolutely agreed with Linda and Michael. We're just worried. These apps are designed for millennials and Gen Z. They have different protocols, different expectations. What? You think I don't know how to date? Sarah felt her cheeks heating up. That familiar flush of embarrassment mixed with anger. I was dating when you all were in diapers. I met your father at a dance hall in 1975. We didn't have apps, but we certainly knew how to meet people. That was 50 years ago, Mom, Michael said gently, which somehow made it worse. Things are different now. The internet changed everything. And honestly, he exchanged a look with Jennifer, one of those loaded married couple glances that carried entire conversations. We're just concerned about you being alone so much. Maybe this is coming from a place of loneliness? The word hung in the air like an accusation. So let me get this straight, Sarah said, setting down her napkin with deliberate precision. You're all worried that I'm lonely, but when I try to do something about it, you tell me I'm too old and too stupid to manage? We never said stupid, Linda started. You implied it. All of you. Sarah looked around the table at her children and their spouses, these people she'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, and felt a surge of something she rarely allowed herself. Anger. I spent the last 3 years doing exactly what you all wanted. I downsized to this condo. I joined that expensive gym. I took up watercolor painting. I babysit Madison whenever you ask, Michael. I drive 2 hours to help Linda reorganize her closets. I show up to every holiday, every birthday, every soccer game. And the one thing I decide to do for myself, you all treat me like I'm having a breakdown. The family drama settled over the table like fog, thick and uncomfortable. Madison appeared in the doorway, sensing the tension, and quickly retreated back upstairs. Tom cleared his throat. We're just trying to protect you, Sarah. That's what families do. No, Sarah said quietly, standing up and beginning to clear plates with hands that trembled slightly. What families do is support each other, trust each other. This is what you do when you think someone's incompetent. The rest of dinner was strained. They made it through dessert, a lemon cake Sarah had made from scratch, with stilted small talk about the weather and Madison's track meets. When everyone finally left, Linda hovering at the door with worried eyes, and Michael promising to check in more often. Sarah closed the door and leaned against it, exhausted. Her phone buzzed. A Bumble notification. Despite everything, she smiled. David Kowalski's profile had caught her eye 3 days before the disastrous Sunday dinner. His first photo showed him in a woodshop, wearing safety goggles and holding a piece of sanded oak, his smile warm and a little shy. 71 years old, retired English teacher from Bethesda, widower of 5 years. His bio read, "I spend my days building furniture, listening to jazz, and trying to perfect my late wife Anna's pierogi recipe, failing miserably. My kids say I read too much and talk too little. Looking for someone who appreciates Oxford commas and bad puns. Swipe right if you know the difference between there and there." Sarah had laughed out loud, actually laughed, alone in her living room, and swiped right before she could overthink it. They'd matched immediately. His first message, "Your profile says you love terrible puns. Challenge accepted. Why don't scientists trust atoms?" She typed back, "Why? Because they make up everything. Your turn." They'd messaged for 3 days straight, trading puns, book recommendations, and stories about their late spouses. David told her about Anna, a librarian who died of cancer, who'd made him promise not to turn into one of those sad widowers who eats cereal for dinner and stops shaving. Sarah told him about Robert, his terrible singing voice and his excellent golf swing, how he'd proposed on a beach in Delaware with a ring he'd been carrying in his pocket for 3 months, too nervous to ask. "Coffee?" David had finally messaged on Tuesday afternoon, right after her disaster of a family dinner. "There's a Starbucks in Clarendon. Tomorrow at 2? Sarah had stared at the message for a full minute, hearing her children's warnings echo in her head. Scammers, catfishers, vulnerable older women. Then she typed, "See you there." She spent Wednesday morning in a state of nervous energy that reminded her of first dates in high school. She changed outfits 3 times, finally settling on dark jeans, a soft green sweater, and the good leather jacket Robert had bought her for their 40th anniversary. She put on lipstick, took it off, put it back on. Ridiculous. She was 68 years old, not 16. The Starbucks was crowded with laptop warriors and students. Sarah arrived 10 minutes early, ordered a latte she didn't really want, and claimed a table by the window. Every time the door opened, her heart jumped. At 2:03, David walked in. He looked exactly like his photos, tall, maybe 6'1", with silver hair and warm brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore jeans and a navy blue cardigan over a button-down shirt. When he spotted her, his face broke into a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Sarah?" "David. Hi." She stood up, and they did that awkward dance of whether to shake hands or hug, finally settling on a brief, friendly hug that smelled like sawdust and coffee. "Sorry I'm late," he said, setting down his own coffee. Black, no sugar. "I was finishing a bookshelf and lost track of time. Occupational hazard of retirement." "How long have you been woodworking?" "Since I was 12. My dad had a shop in our basement in Chicago. He taught me everything. Joints, stains, how to read wood grain. It was our thing." David smiled at the memory. "What about you? Your profile said you worked at Boeing?" And just like that, they were talking. Really talking. Sarah told him about her career, starting as a secretary and working her way up to senior financial analyst over 32 years. David told her about teaching English at Walter Johnson High School, the students who'd stayed in touch, the ones who'd gone on to become writers and journalists. Time evaporated. At some point, David went to get them both refills. Sarah checked her phone. 4:15 p.m. They'd been talking for over 2 hours. "Oh my God," she said when David returned. "I'm so sorry, I didn't realize—" "Are you hungry?" David interrupted. "Because there's a Thai place 2 blocks from here, and I'm starving, and I'm really enjoying this conversation. Sarah hesitated for only a moment. I love Thai food. Dinner lasted another 2 hours. They closed down the restaurant, the last customers, the staff cleaning around them while they traded stories about their families. David had 3 kids, 2 daughters and a son, all married, scattered between Maryland and North Carolina. 7 grandkids, with another on the way. They staged an intervention when my granddaughter Zoe set up my Bumble profile, David admitted, laughing. My son literally said, Dad, are you sure you're ready for this? Like I was about to join the Peace Corps or something. My kids were worse, Sarah said, and found herself telling him about Sunday dinner. The warnings, the implication that she was too old and vulnerable to know what she was doing. David's expression shifted to something serious. That must have hurt. It did, Sarah admitted, surprised by the relief of saying it out loud. I raised them to be independent thinkers, and now they treat me like I can't think for myself. Kids get weird when parents start dating, David said gently. They did with me too. I think it threatens their sense of order. Like, Mom and Dad are supposed to stay in their boxes, and when we don't, it scares them. That's generous. Maybe. Or maybe they're just scared of losing us, of things changing. David reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of touching hers. For what it's worth, I'm really glad you didn't listen to them. I almost didn't make a profile. Zoe had to practically force me. And if either of us had listened to our kids, he smiled, we wouldn't be here. Sarah felt something warm unfurl in her chest. Something that had been dormant for 3 years. I'm glad I'm here too, she said. The next Sunday, Sarah didn't mention David at dinner, or the Sunday after that. She'd learned her lesson, but she saw him, twice during the week, then 3 times. Then it became easier to count the days they didn't see each other. They went to the Kennedy Center for a piano recital of Chopin's Nocturnes. David held her hand in the dark theater, and Sarah forgot to breathe during the second movement. They took a day trip to Annapolis, walked along the harbor, ate overpriced but delicious crab cakes, and watched sailboats slice through the water. He taught her about wood joints, dovetail, mortise, and tenon, finger joints, in his garage workshop, his hands guiding hers as she tried to use a chisel. She took him hiking at Great Falls Park, and they stood on the overlook watching the Potomac crash over rocks, both of them breathing hard from the climb. Anna loved it here, David said quietly, staring at the falls. We used to come every fall to see the leaves. Robert proposed at Great Falls, Sarah replied. Different overlook, but same park. He was so nervous he dropped the ring and it almost rolled into the water. They looked at each other, understanding passing between them, that space where grief and happiness could coexist, where the past and present could hold hands. Is this okay? David asked. Being here with me, in these places? Sarah thought about it honestly. Yeah, it is. I think Robert would like you. You're nothing alike, but he'd appreciate that you make me laugh, that you listen when I talk, that you know the difference between who and whom. David laughed. High praise from a Boeing analyst. The highest. 3 months in, David asked her to be his girlfriend. They were in his living room, listening to Miles Davis, drinking wine, and he just said it. I know we're in our 60s and 70s, and this probably sounds ridiculous, but would you be my girlfriend? Officially? Sarah, who'd been successful in business, who'd raised 3 children, who'd buried a husband and rebuilt a life, felt herself blush like a teenager. Yes, I'd like that very much. They kissed on his couch, with Kind of Blue playing in the background, and Sarah felt 17 and 68 all at once. Meanwhile, the Wang family was unraveling with a slow-motion predictability that would have been darkly funny if it weren't so painful. It started with Linda finding the credit card statement. Tom had always handled their finances, his one contribution to the household, given that Linda earned twice his salary at her consulting firm. But he'd gotten sloppy, or maybe careless, or maybe part of him wanted to be caught. The statement arrived on a Tuesday, and Linda opened it while paying bills. 4 charges at a boutique hotel in Atlanta, 3 at a jewelry store, 2 at an expensive steakhouse, flowers from a florist Linda had never heard of. She'd been in Atlanta for a conference in June. Tom had been home with their son. Except he hadn't been. When she confronted him that night, Tom's denials lasted approximately 90 seconds before crumbling. Her name was Amber, dental hygienist, 29 years old. They'd met when Tom went in for a cleaning 8 months ago. "It didn't mean anything," Tom said, the most cliché phrase in the history of infidelity. "It was just, you're always working, Linda. Always on your phone. When was the last time we went on a date?" "When was the last time you planned one?" Linda shot back, her voice shaking. "You spent $4,000 on hotels and jewelry for your mistress, but you gave me a $50 Applebee's gift card for our anniversary." Tom moved into the guest room that night. 3 days later, he moved to his brother's place in Fairfax. Linda called Sarah at midnight, sobbing so hard she could barely speak. Sarah drove over immediately, bringing tissues and chamomile tea, and the comforting presence of a mother who'd seen her daughter through skinned knees, bad breakups, and now this, the worst betrayal of all. "I'm so stupid," Linda kept saying. "I should have seen it. The late nights, the new cologne, the way he stopped touching me." "You're not stupid," Sarah said firmly. "He's a cheater. That's on him, not you. Everyone's going to know. Everyone's going to talk. Let them talk." Sarah held her daughter while she cried, stroking her hair like she had when Linda was small. And she didn't say what she was thinking, that she'd never liked Tom, that she'd seen something slippery in his eyes at Linda's wedding, that she'd bitten her tongue for 17 years because you don't get to choose your children's spouses. She also didn't mention David. Not that night. It didn't feel like the right time to announce she'd found happiness while her daughter's marriage imploded. Michael's crisis came 2 weeks later. Jennifer showed up at Sarah's door at 6 a.m. on a Sunday, her face pale, her hands shaking. Madison was with her grandmother, Jennifer's mother, because Jennifer didn't want her daughter to see her like this. "He's been gambling," Jennifer said without preamble, walking into Sarah's living room like a ghost. "Sports betting, for 2 years, maybe longer." The whole story came out over coffee that Sarah brewed strong and bitter. Michael had started small, $20 here, $50 there, just for fun while watching games. But it escalated. Online casinos, high-stakes poker websites. He'd taken out a credit card Jennifer didn't know about. Maxed it out. Taken out another. The credit card debt was $37,000. Madison's college fund, the one they'd been contributing to for 16 years, was gone. Cleaned out. Michael had been transferring money in $1,000 increments, thinking he'd win it back. He never did. "I found the statements in his car," Jennifer said, her voice hollow. He'd been hiding them in his glove compartment. $37,000, Sarah. We don't have that kind of money. Our mortgage, Madison's braces, her SAT prep. How are we supposed to pay for college now?" Sarah felt rage kindle in her chest, hot and protective. Her son. Her smart, ambitious son who'd gotten his MBA, who'd seemed to have it all together. Where is he now? At home. I left. I told him I needed space to think, that I couldn't even look at him. Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. Madison doesn't know. She thinks we're having a normal marriage disagreement. How do I tell her that her father gambled away her future? You don't, Sarah said. Not yet. First, you figure out what you're going to do. I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. Jennifer looked at Sarah with desperate eyes. Should I leave him? Stay? We've been married for 19 years. I thought I knew him. Sarah thought about the easy advice she could give. Leave him, he betrayed you. You deserve better. But marriage was complicated, and she'd been married for 43 years. She knew that people made mistakes. She also knew that some mistakes were unforgivable. I can't tell you what to do, Sarah said carefully, but I can tell you this. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. If you stay and try to work it out, I'll support you. If you leave, I'll support you. You and Madison will never be alone in this. Jennifer broke down then, the kind of crying that came from somewhere deep and broken. Sarah held her daughter-in-law and thought about her own children, the ones who'd warned her about dating apps and scammers and vulnerability, and wondered how they'd gotten here. How had she raised two kids who'd ended up in such spectacular messes? But she knew the answer. Life happened. Marriage was hard. People made mistakes, kept secrets, grew apart. No one was immune. Not even Sarah, who'd had a good marriage, but not a perfect one. She and Robert had weathered storms too. His drinking phase in his 30s, her near affair with a colleague in her 40s, emotional, not physical, but real enough to count. The year they'd barely spoken after his mother moved in with them. Marriage was work, and sometimes the work wasn't enough. Through all of this, Linda's separation, Michael's gambling revelation, the family implosion, Sarah kept seeing David, and somehow that made her feel guilty. She'd show up to help Linda move Tom's clothes out of the house, then drive to David's place and help him sand a dresser. She'd babysit Madison while Michael and Jennifer screamed at each other in therapy, then meet David for dinner and laugh about his disastrous attempt at making pad thai. She felt like she was living in two worlds, one falling apart, one being built. "You look worried," David said one evening in late October. They were at his place, cooking dinner together. He was teaching her to make pierogi from his late wife's recipe, and Sarah was struggling with the dumpling folds. "My kids are going through hell," Sarah admitted. "Linda's getting divorced. Michael's in couples therapy and might lose his house. And here I am, happy." "It feels wrong." David set down his rolling pin. "Why does your happiness depend on theirs?" "Because I'm their mother." "You're also a person, Sarah, with your own life, your own needs." He moved closer, wiping flour from her cheek with his thumb. "You can't put your life on hold because theirs are messy. That's not how this works." "But they warned me about you," Sarah said with a half laugh, half sob. "About dating apps and scammers and being vulnerable. And now look at them. Their lives are disasters, and mine is really good. Is that terrible? Is it terrible that I'm happy while they're miserable?" "No," David said firmly. "It's human. And honestly, maybe they need to see that happiness is possible. That starting over isn't the end of the world." He paused. "When are you going to tell them about us?" Sarah had been avoiding this question for 3 months. "I don't know. The timing never feels right. Or maybe you're scared they'll ruin it, like they tried to before." He wasn't wrong. Sarah was terrified that introducing David to her family would somehow contaminate what they had. This pure, simple happiness that existed outside of everyone else's opinions. But she also knew she couldn't hide him forever, and she didn't want to. "Thanksgiving," she said suddenly. "I'll tell them at Thanksgiving." Thanksgiving at the Wang house had always been Sarah's favorite holiday. Better than Christmas with its commercial chaos. Better than Easter with its religious obligations. Thanksgiving was about food and gratitude and family, pure and simple. This year felt different. Linda arrived alone, having officially filed for divorce the week before. She looked thinner, her eyes tired but determined. She'd started therapy and joined a pottery class, and she showed Sarah photos of the lopsided bowls she'd made with something approaching pride. Michael and Jennifer came together, but the tension between them was palpable. They were still in therapy, still sleeping in separate rooms, still trying to figure out if their marriage could survive Michael's betrayal. Madison, now 17 and too smart to miss the stress, spent most of her time on her phone, escaping into group chats and TikTok. Tom was conspicuously absent, relegated to spending Thanksgiving with his brother's family in Fairfax. No one mentioned him, which was somehow louder than if they had. Sarah cooked her traditional spread, turkey with sage stuffing, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce from scratch, 3 kinds of pie. She moved through her kitchen with practiced efficiency, but her stomach churned with nerves. David was waiting in his car outside. They'd planned this together. He'd come in after dinner, during dessert, when everyone was full and hopefully more relaxed. Sarah had texted him updates throughout the day. Turkey's in. They're here. Linda's crying in the bathroom. Michael and Jennifer just had a fight in the hallway. Finally, with everyone seated around the table, plates full, Sarah stood up. Her hands were shaking slightly, but she kept her voice steady. "Everyone, I have an announcement to make." The table went quiet. Linda looked up warily from her phone, where she'd been texting her lawyer. Michael and Jennifer stopped their silent standoff long enough to look at her. Madison even paused her scrolling. "I've been seeing someone," Sarah said. "His name is David, and before you all start, yes, I met him on that dating app you warned me about. The one you all said was full of scammers and catfishers and people trying to steal my money." She saw Linda open her mouth to speak and held up her hand. "Let me finish. David is 71. He's a retired English teacher from Bethesda. He's kind and funny and smart. He makes me laugh. He listens when I talk. He builds furniture in his garage, and he's teaching me woodworking. We're going to Montreal for New Year's Eve. We're taking a cooking class together in January. And honestly, I haven't been this happy in years." The silence stretched. Sarah could hear the kitchen clock ticking, the sound of rain starting against the windows. "I know you all thought I was being foolish when I downloaded that app," Sarah continued, her voice stronger now. "I know you were worried about me. But sometimes the people who love us don't actually know what we need better than we do. Sometimes we have to take risks, even when they seem crazy to everyone else. Sometimes we have to live our own lives, make our own mistakes, find our own happiness." She looked at Linda, whose divorce papers were probably in her car. At Michael, whose marriage was hanging by a thread. At Jennifer, who was trying so hard to forgive. "The last few months have been hard for all of you," Sarah said more gently. "And I've been here for you. I will always be here for you. But I can't put my life on hold waiting for yours to be perfect, and I won't apologize for being happy just because you're struggling." Tom cleared his throat from his exile at the kids' table where he'd somehow ended up, but Linda shot him a look that could have melted steel, and he closed his mouth. Michael spoke first. "Can we meet him?" Sarah felt relief flood through her. "He's actually outside. I didn't want to spring him on everyone, but..." She walked to the front door and waved. A moment later, David appeared, carrying a bouquet of autumn flowers and a pie in a glass dish, his silver hair neatly combed and his expression nervous but warm. "Happy Thanksgiving, everyone," he said. "I'm David. I hope you don't mind one more at the table. I brought pumpkin pie, made the crust from scratch. Sarah tells me it's a family recipe requirement." And just like that, the tension cracked. Linda got up to get another plate, her movements automatic, hostess mode overriding her surprise. Michael stood to shake David's hand, and Sarah saw something in her son's eyes. Respect, maybe, or recognition. Jennifer smiled, genuine and warm, and even Madison looked up from her phone with interest. "That's a beautiful pie," Jennifer said. "Did you really make it yourself?" "From scratch," David confirmed. "Well, my granddaughter helped with the crust. She's 11 and has better technique than I do. But the filling is all me. My late wife's recipe. She won the county fair 3 years running with this pie." They absorbed him into the family with surprising ease. David had the gift of conversation. He asked Madison about track, talked literature with Linda, discussed financial planning strategies with Michael. He complimented Jennifer's sweet potato casserole and told a story about his own disastrous first Thanksgiving as a newlywed that had everyone laughing. Sarah watched from across the table, her heart full in a way it hadn't been in years. This man, this stranger from a dating app that her children had mocked, fitting into her family like he'd always been there. Later, after dinner, while David was helping Michael and Jennifer clean up in the kitchen, insisting despite being a guest, Linda pulled Sarah aside into the hallway. "Mom, I owe you an apology," Linda said quietly. "A big one. For what we said about the dating app. For treating you like you didn't know what you were doing. We were so condescending. And you were right. We were being terrible." "You were worried," Sarah started. "No," Linda interrupted firmly. "We were being condescending. And honestly," she glanced back toward the dining room where Tom's empty chair sat like an accusation. "Maybe we were projecting our own failures onto you. You're brave, Mom. Braver than any of us gave you credit for. You're out there actually living your life while we're all—" She gestured vaguely at the chaos around them. "While we're all just surviving our own messes." Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand. "You're going to be okay. The divorce is hard, but you're strong. You always have been. I don't feel strong. Neither did I when Dad died. But we figure it out. We survive. And sometimes, if we're lucky, we find something better on the other side." Sarah smiled. "You're already taking steps. The therapy, the pottery class. That guy Marcus you mentioned? The instructor?" Linda blushed. "It's nothing serious. We've just had coffee a few times." "That's how it starts," Sarah said knowingly. "Coffee, then dinner. Then before you know it, you're making pumpkin pie from scratch." They both laughed, and it felt good. Real. Like maybe the family drama that had defined the last few months was finally starting to ease. Michael approached her later, while David was showing Madison photos of a bookshelf he'd built. Michael looked uncomfortable, his hands shoved in his pockets like a teenager. "Mom, I need to say something." Sarah waited. "I was wrong," Michael said, "about the dating app, about treating you like you couldn't handle your own life, and I'm sorry. You were right. We were being condescending. We thought we were protecting you, but really—" He exhaled slowly. "Really? I think we were scared. Scared of you changing. Scared of you not needing us anymore. Scared that you'd find happiness while we were all falling apart." "I will always need you," Sarah said softly. "You're my son. But you're right. I don't need you to manage my life." "I know. And David seems great. Really great. He talks about you the way—" Michael's voice caught. "The way Dad used to. Like you hung the moon." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "Your father was the love of my life, Michael. But that doesn't mean there can't be another chapter. David knows that. He loved his wife, too. We're not replacing anyone. We're just finding something new." "I get it now," Michael said. "And I'm happy for you, Mom. Really happy. You deserve this." They hugged, and Sarah felt some of the tension she'd been carrying for months finally release. The evening wound down with David's pumpkin pie, which was objectively delicious, and coffee. The family lingered around the table, talking and laughing more easily than they had in months. Madison asked David about woodworking, and he promised to show her his shop. Linda mentioned she'd been thinking about redoing her kitchen cabinets, and David immediately offered suggestions about materials and design. When everyone finally left, Linda hugging her mother extra long, Michael shaking David's hand with genuine warmth, Sarah and David stood in the doorway watching the cars pull away. "Well," David said, "that went better than expected." "You charmed them," Sarah accused. I brought pie. That's not charm. That's bribery. He pulled her close, and they stood there in the doorway, the November cold biting, but the warmth between them enough. I'm proud of you. For telling them. For standing up for yourself. I should have done it months ago. You did it when you were ready. That's what matters. They went inside, and David helped Sarah clean up the last of the dinner dishes. They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes when two people are truly at ease with each other. The radio played soft jazz, Miles Davis, always Miles Davis, and rain pattered against the windows. Stay? Sarah asked when the last dish was dried. It's late. And the rain? I'd like that, David said softly. They settled on the couch with tea, and Sarah felt something shift. This was real. This relationship that had started with a swipe on an app her children had mocked, that had survived their warnings and her own doubts, was becoming something permanent and solid. What are you thinking? David asked, reading her expression. That I'm happy, Sarah said simply, and that I almost let fear talk me out of this. But you didn't. No, I didn't. The weeks after Thanksgiving brought unexpected changes. If Sarah's grandma revenge had been to find happiness while her children struggled, the sweetest part was watching them slowly begin to rebuild their own lives, inspired perhaps by her example. Linda threw herself into pottery with fierce determination. What started as a distraction from her divorce became a passion. She'd show up at Sarah's condo covered in clay, her fingers stained, talking excitedly about glazes and firing techniques. And Marcus, the pottery instructor with the beard and kind eyes, became a regular fixture in her stories. We're taking it slow, Linda told Sarah over coffee in December. Really slow. I'm not ready for anything serious. But he makes me laugh, Mom. And after Tom, she shook her head. I forgot what it felt like to be with someone who actually listens when I talk. That's good, Sarah said. You deserve someone who listens. Like you and David, Linda smiled. I saw the way he looks at you on Thanksgiving. That man is completely gone for you. Sarah felt herself blush, pleased and embarrassed all at once. We're happy. I can tell, and I'm glad. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it, but I'm really glad you didn't listen to us. The divorce proceedings moved forward. Tom tried to argue for joint custody of their house, which was laughable, considering he'd moved in with Amber 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. Linda's lawyer was ruthless, and by Christmas, Linda had the house and Tom had exactly what he deserved, which was considerably less than he'd hoped for. Michael and Jennifer's journey was harder, messier. Recovering from gambling addiction and financial betrayal wasn't something that happened in a few therapy sessions. But Michael joined Gamblers Anonymous, got a second job at Home Depot to help pay down the debt, and started being honest, brutally, painfully honest, for the first time in years. Jennifer didn't forgive him right away. Sarah didn't expect her to. But slowly, incrementally, Jennifer started sleeping in their bedroom again. They started having dinner together as a family. They opened a new savings account, this one with both their names, with a promise of transparency. It might not work, Jennifer admitted to Sarah over lunch in January. They'd started having regular lunches, just the two of them, something they'd never done before. I'm not sure I can ever trust him the way I did, but I think we owe it to ourselves to try. 19 years is a long time to throw away without a fight. There's no shame in trying, Sarah said, and no shame in walking away if it doesn't work. You'll know what's right. How did you and Robert make it work? 43 years. That's forever. Sarah thought carefully. We almost didn't. There were years we probably should have been in therapy, but were too proud or too stubborn. Years we hurt each other, but we kept choosing each other, even when it was hard. And we were lucky. We grew in the same direction instead of apart. Not everyone does. Did you ever think about leaving? Once, maybe twice. When his mother lived with us, we fought constantly. I packed a bag and everything, got as far as the driveway before I turned around. Sarah smiled at the memory. But that's the thing. There's no perfect marriage. There's just two people deciding, every day, whether to keep trying. And some days, the answer is no. That's okay too. Jennifer absorbed this, turning her coffee cup in her hands. I want to keep trying. Most days. Some days I want to burn his clothes in the backyard. Those days are valid too, Sarah said, and they both laughed. Christmas came and went with new traditions. David joined the family celebration, bringing gifts he'd made, a jewelry box for Linda with intricate inlay work, a wooden chess set for Michael and Jennifer, a picture frame for Madison with her name carved into it. He fit into the family seamlessly, his presence somehow making everyone more relaxed. Madison, especially, took to him. She'd started visiting his workshop on weekends, learning woodworking alongside Sarah. David was a natural teacher, patient, encouraging, never condescending. He taught Madison to use a chisel safely, to understand grain direction, to appreciate the slow satisfaction of creating something with her hands. Your granddaughter is talented, David told Sarah one Sunday afternoon in January. They were in his workshop, finishing a coffee table they'd been building together. She has good hands and better patience. Most teenagers don't want to spend their Saturdays sanding wood. She's been through a lot this year, Sarah said. Her parents' problems. I think she likes being here because it's peaceful. No drama. She told me she wants to apply to architecture school. Says working with wood made her interested in how things are built. David smiled. That's Anna's legacy, I think. She always said teaching isn't about the curriculum. It's about showing kids what's possible. Sarah looked around the workshop. The tools hung precisely on pegboards, the wood stacked by type, the smell of sawdust and linseed oil. This space had become hers too somehow. A place where she was learning new skills at 68, where her hands were learning language they'd never spoken. I never thought I'd be doing this, she admitted. Building furniture, using power tools. I spent 32 years in an office. And now you're here, David said, moving behind her to guide her hands as she used the belt sander. Life is funny that way. We think we know who we are, and then something happens and we discover whole new versions of ourselves. Sarah leaned back against him slightly, feeling the solid warmth of him. I'm glad I found you. I'm glad Zoe forced me to make that profile, David said. I almost deleted it 3 times before I saw your face. What made you swipe right? Your smile. And the hiking boots. I thought, here's a woman who's not afraid of getting dirty. He kissed the top of her head. Also, the pun about NPR. Anyone who jokes about public radio is my kind of person. February brought Valentine's Day, which Sarah and David spent in Montreal, as promised. The city was frozen and beautiful, snow piled on cobblestone streets, French bakeries steaming up their windows. They stayed in a small hotel in Old Montreal, wandered through museums, ate too much poutine and tarte au sucre. On their last night, David took her to a jazz club in a basement on Rue Saint-Paul. The music was live and intimate, the singer's voice smoky and rich. They sat close together in the dim light, David's arm around her shoulders, and Sarah felt completely, utterly content. I have something to say, David said during a break between sets. Sarah's heart jumped. This felt significant. Okay. I love you, he said simply. I've loved you since that first coffee date when you spent 20 minutes explaining Boeing's supply chain logistics with the enthusiasm of someone half your age. I've loved you in my workshop and in your kitchen and hiking at Great Falls. I love that you're brave enough to try new things and stubborn enough to finish them. I love your terrible puns and your excellent pot roast and the way you talk to your daughter on the phone. He took her hand. I loved Anna for 38 years, and I'll always love her. But I love you too, Sarah. Differently, but just as real. Sarah felt tears slip down her cheeks. I love you too, I was so scared to, but I do. I love how patient you are when you teach. I love that you read poetry and build furniture and make terrible pierogi. I love that you let me be myself, messy and complicated and figuring things out." They kissed there in the jazz club, with the music starting up again around them. And Sarah thought about her children who'd tried to talk her out of this, who'd warned her about apps and scammers and vulnerability. They'd been wrong about everything. Spring arrived with that sudden, shocking greenness that always surprised Sarah no matter how many Virginia springs she'd lived through. David's garden needed work. Anna had been the gardener, and in the 5 years since her death, he'd let it go wild. Sarah, who'd never gardened beyond a few potted herbs, found herself learning about perennials and soil pH and companion planting. They worked side by side, her hands in the dirt, David beside her explaining the difference between determinate and indeterminate tomatoes. It was peaceful in a way Sarah hadn't expected. Quiet. Grounding. "Move in with me," David said one Saturday in April. They were planting roses along the back fence, and his proposal came so casually that Sarah almost missed it. "What?" "Move in. Here. With me." David sat back on his heels, dirt smudged on his cheek. "We're both rattling around in our separate houses. We spend most nights together anyway. And I like having you here. I like waking up with you. I like making breakfast together and arguing about the crossword puzzle, and knowing you're in the next room." Sarah's first instinct was to say yes immediately. Her second was to think about logistics, selling her condo, combining households, what her children would say. But then she caught herself. What her children would say. She was doing it again, letting their opinions matter more than her own. "Yes," she said, "I'd love to move in with you." David's face broke into a grin. "Yeah? Yeah. My condo is too quiet anyway, and your workshop is bigger than mine." She smiled. "Plus, you make better coffee." "That's the real reason," David teased, pulling her in for a kiss that tasted like dirt and spring and new beginnings. The announcement at Sunday dinner in May was met with considerably more enthusiasm than the first one had been. "That's wonderful, Mom," Linda said immediately, and she meant it. Her own life had steadied. The divorce was final. Marcus had become her official boyfriend, and she'd started selling her pottery at local craft fairs with surprising success. Michael and Jennifer exchanged a look, but this time it was one of genuine happiness. "That's great," Michael said. "David's house has that amazing workshop. You'll have so much space." "When's the move?" Jennifer asked. "We'll help." "All of us." And they did. The entire family showed up on moving day in June. Linda and Marcus, Michael and Jennifer and Madison. Even Tom made a brief, awkward appearance to help carry boxes before disappearing quickly. They packed Sarah's condo with surprising efficiency, decades of belongings sorted into keep, donate, and toss piles. Madison claimed a lamp she'd always loved. Linda took the good china. Michael wanted the old family photos. Jennifer packed the kitchen with careful precision. By evening, Sarah's condo was empty, and David's house was full. They ordered pizza for everyone, spreading out on the back deck while the sun set gold and orange over David's neglected but improving garden. "To new beginnings," Linda toasted, raising her beer bottle. "And to Mom, for being braver than the rest of us." "To Sarah," David added softly, his hand finding hers under the table. "For swiping right." Everyone laughed and drank, and Sarah looked around at her family, broken and rebuilt, messy and real, all of them figuring it out as they went. This was her grandma revenge, she supposed. Not bitter or spiteful, but sweet and earned. Her children had tried to protect her from making a mistake, and instead she'd shown them what courage looked like. She'd found love while their marriages crumbled, yes, but more importantly, she'd shown them that crumbling wasn't the end, that you could rebuild, that happiness was possible even after loss, after betrayal, after everything falling apart. July brought a heat wave and the family barbecue in David's backyard. The garden was thriving now, thanks to Sarah's determined efforts and David's patient instruction. Tomatoes hung heavy on their vines. Roses bloomed along the fence in riots of pink and red and yellow. Sarah manned the grill. She'd learned that David was a terrible cook when it came to anything that required heat, while David set the table. Madison and her boyfriend, yes, she had a boyfriend now, a sweet kid named Tyler who played bass in a band, tossed a frisbee on the lawn. Linda and Marcus arrived with a case of beer and one of Linda's ceramic serving bowls, glazed a beautiful deep blue. Michael and Jennifer came last, and Sarah noticed immediately that they were holding hands. Really holding hands. Not just the obligatory spousal handhold, but the kind that meant something. Jennifer's face had a lightness Sarah hadn't seen in over a year. "Good news," Michael said, when everyone was gathered, beers in hand, the smell of burgers on the grill heavy in the summer air. "We paid off the last credit card yesterday. We're debt-free. Well, except the mortgage, but that's normal debt." "Michael," Jennifer said proudly, squeezing his hand, "we're debt-free." Everyone cheered. It had taken months of Michael working 2 jobs, of Jennifer taking freelance projects, of brutal budgeting and no vacations and endless sacrifice. But they'd done it. And, Jennifer added, "we're renewing our vows in September. Small ceremony, just family. We want to do it right this time. Make new promises and actually keep them." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "That's wonderful." "You and David are invited, obviously," Michael said. "Best man and best woman, if you'll do it." David looked at Sarah, who nodded. "We'd be honored," David said. The afternoon dissolved into easy conversation and too much food. Marcus told a story about a pottery disaster that had Linda laughing so hard she cried. Madison and Tyler played their band's demo from his phone, and everyone pretended it was better than it actually was. Jennifer showed Sarah photos of the venue for the vow renewal, a small garden in Georgetown, simple and perfect. As the sun started to set, casting everything in golden light, David pulled Sarah aside to the garden. They stood among the tomatoes, and he pulled a small box from his pocket. Sarah's breath caught. "Before you panic," David said quickly, "this isn't what you think. Well, it is, but also it isn't." "That's clear as mud," Sarah said, her heart racing. "I don't want to get married," David said. "I was married to Anna for 38 years, and that was my marriage. And you were married to Robert for 43, and that was yours. I don't want to replace that or compete with it." Sarah relaxed slightly. "Okay. But I want you to know that I'm committed to this. To us. For however long we have." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple silver with a small turquoise stone. Anna's grandmother's ring. She would have wanted you to have it. Not as an engagement ring, but as a promise. That I'm here. That I'm not going anywhere. That this is real. Sarah took the ring with shaking hands. It fit perfectly on her right hand, the turquoise catching the evening light. "It's beautiful." "So are you," David said simply. "So are we." They kissed there in the garden, surrounded by tomatoes and roses and the life they'd built together. From the deck, Sarah heard someone, probably Madison, whoop and cheer. When they walked back to rejoin the family, everyone was smiling. Linda hugged her mother tight. Michael shook David's hand with genuine affection. Jennifer wiped away happy tears. "Speech," Marcus called out, ever the instigator. "Oh God, no," Sarah laughed. "Speech, speech." Madison and Tyler took up the chant, and soon everyone was calling for it. Sarah looked around at her family, her complicated, messy, beautiful family, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. For all of it. The pain and the joy, the mistakes and the rebuilding, the endings and the beginnings. Okay, fine, she said, raising her beer. A short speech. This time last year, you all thought I was crazy for downloading a dating app. You warned me about scammers and catfishers and making a fool of myself. We were idiots, Linda interjected. You were scared, Sarah corrected gently. And worried. And maybe a little bit right. It was a risk. But here's what I learned. The biggest risk is not taking any risks at all. It's letting fear or other people's opinions keep you from living, from trying, from being happy. She looked at Linda. You're taking risks now. Pottery and Marcus, and building a life after heartbreak. She looked at Michael and Jennifer. You're taking the biggest risk of all. Trusting again after betrayal. Choosing each other again. She looked at David. And I took a risk on a 71-year-old English teacher who makes terrible pierogi but excellent furniture. Best risk I ever took. To risks, David toasted, raising his beer. To risks, everyone echoed. And to Mom, Linda added, for showing us what courage looks like, even when we were too stupid to see it. They drank to that, and the party continued into the evening, fireflies appearing as the darkness came, citronella candles lit against the mosquitoes, laughter floating up into the summer night. The pottery studio where Linda now taught, yes, she'd quit her consulting job to pursue pottery full-time, a decision that would have seemed insane a year ago, but now felt inevitable, was hosting a holiday showcase. Sarah and David arrived early to help set up, carrying boxes of Linda's work from her car. You're displaying Mom's cutting board, right? Linda asked David, directing traffic like a general. The one you two made together? It's in the truck, David confirmed, along with the photo series of the build process. The showcase was a celebration of second acts, artists who'd found their passion later in life, who'd walked away from careers and security to chase something real. Linda's section featured her pottery alongside photos and stories of her journey from corporate consultant to working artist. But she'd also included a special display. Inspiration. Photos of Sarah at the pottery wheel, in David's workshop, hiking at Great Falls. The caption read, "My mother taught me that it's never too late to reinvent yourself. At 68, she downloaded a dating app against her family's advice, found love, learned woodworking, and showed us all what courage looks like. This collection is dedicated to her." Sarah cried when she saw it. Happy tears, proud tears, grateful tears all mixed together. The showcase opened, and people flooded in. Linda's work sold steadily. Bowls and vases and decorative plates with her signature blue glaze. But people kept stopping at the inspiration display, reading the caption, looking at the photos of Sarah with sawdust in her hair and a smile on her face. "Is that your mom?" a young woman asked Linda, pointing to the photos. "That's her," Linda said proudly. "Over there, actually." She gestured to where Sarah and David stood, examining another artist's metalwork. The woman walked over, introducing herself as Claire. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I had to tell you, your daughter's story about you inspired me. I'm 56, and I've been thinking about leaving my accounting job to open a bakery. Everyone tells me I'm crazy, that I'm too old, that I should wait until retirement. But seeing your story," she smiled, a little embarrassed, "it made me think maybe crazy is exactly what I need to be." Sarah took Claire's hand. "Do it. Life is too short to wait for permission. And 56? She laughed. "You're a baby. You have decades to build something amazing." Throughout the evening, similar conversations happened. People drawn to Linda's inspiration display, moved by the story of Grandma Revenge. That wasn't revenge at all, but simply living authentically. An elderly man who'd been widowed for 5 years and was terrified to date again. A woman in her 40s considering going back to school. A couple in their 60s talking about the RV trip they'd been putting off. Sarah talked to all of them, offering encouragement, sharing her own fears and doubts. being honest about how hard it had been to ignore her children's well-meaning warnings. "But they came around?" the widower asked hopefully. "They did," Sarah confirmed, "because they saw that I was happy, really happy. And eventually, that mattered more than being right." As the evening wound down, with half of Linda's inventory sold and the showcase deemed a massive success, the family gathered at a nearby restaurant for dinner. Linda and Marcus, Michael and Jennifer, wearing matching rings from their vow renewal, Madison and Tyler, and Sarah and David. "To Mom," Michael said, raising his glass of wine, "for being stubborn enough to ignore us and brave enough to live her own life." "To Sarah," David added, his eyes warm, "for swiping right." "To second chances," Jennifer said softly. "To new beginnings," Linda finished. They clinked glasses, and Sarah looked around the table at her family. Imperfect, rebuilt, real. This wasn't the life she'd imagined 3 years ago, standing in her silent condo after Robert's death. It was better. Messier and more complicated, and infinitely better. Her children had tried to protect her from making a mistake. Instead, they'd witnessed her greatest triumph, choosing happiness, taking risks, and building a life worth living. And in doing so, she'd inadvertently taught them the same lesson. The Kwamisarimp. Family drama that had defined that disastrous Sunday dinner felt like ancient history now. In its place was this: laughter and love and the quiet satisfaction of people who'd survived their own storms and come out stronger. "What are you thinking about?" David whispered, his hand finding hers under the table. "That I'm grateful," Sarah said simply, "for all of it. The risk and the reward, the fear and the courage, the warnings and ignoring them. No regrets? Not a single one." David kissed her temple, and across the table, Linda caught her eye and smiled. A smile that said, "I see you, Mom. I see your happiness, and I'm grateful too." The restaurant buzzed with conversation and clinking silverware. Outside, snow had started to fall, the first of the season, turning the city soft and white. Inside, Sarah sat surrounded by her family, the one she'd been born into and the one she'd chosen, and felt completely, perfectly at peace. This was the real revenge, she supposed. Not proving her children wrong, but proving that love and happiness and new beginnings were possible at any age. That downloading that app hadn't been a disaster at all. It had been a doorway, and she'd been brave enough to walk through it. The end. If you were in Sarah's shoes, would you do same? Let's have your experiences in the comments below.